We got a lot to get to today, so I'm going to jump right in. We're in week 3 of this Pickup Lines series, and the idea behind this is not cheesy, like creepy bar or club pickup lines. That's not it. It's not like the line, if we were all scabs, I'd pick you, even though that's probably my favorite line of all time. What we're talking about is 1 or 2 lines that you hear at some point in your life that just for whatever reason change the trajectory of your life. You think that life is going to look one way, you hear something, and not only does it change your conversation, but maybe it changes your day. And then we see in these stories, and this is the case with some of our stories in here, sometimes you hear a line and it changes the trajectory of your entire life. By the way, I think the kids' church was full. We have more kids in here because of that. And so I love it. If you're feeling pressure and you're like, oh, my kid is yelling and crying, I love that. I love that they're in here and they get to be a part of this. So don't freak if you're a parent and your kid starts to yell. We're all good with that. But I wanted to start a little bit differently because we've been talking about these stories of Jesus and his interactions with people. And I wanted to go to the Old Testament at the beginning of this message. So Bible's split into 2 parts. Everything from the life of Jesus on is the New Testament, and everything before the life of Jesus is the Old Testament, and we're going to start with an Old Testament story this morning. So you have the Israelite people, the Jewish people, God's chosen people who have been promised, you're going to have a nation of your own, you're going to have a land of your own, you're going to have this place. It is what I declare as God, it's what I promise. But at one point in history, we see that they are enslaved in Egypt, that they are in captivity, and they're getting restless. They're grumbling. When is this going to happen? What God has promised us all these years. So God uses this man named Moses, and he goes, I want you to go to Pharaoh, top guy in charge of Egypt, and I want you to deliver my people. I want you to get them out of there. So Moses goes to Pharaoh and goes, hey, Pharaoh, how about letting these guys go? And Pharaoh goes, how about no? And he's like, all right, that wasn't as easy as I thought. So then God sends this series of plagues against Egypt, against the Egyptian people. And there's so much calamity, so much damage, so much chaos that finally Pharaoh goes, white flag. All right, I give up. You guys can go. Israelites, you can go. So the Israelites start, that's the Exodus, this mass Exodus. But after he lets them go, Pharaoh thinks twice about it and goes, you know what? Actually, I need these guys back. He has a change of heart. And so he sends the Egyptian army after them to bring them back. So you have the Israelite people who are making their way, the Egyptian army that is following, and then they come to this body of water called the Red Sea. And they're like, well, great. Right? In fact, they even say to themselves, even though God just did this miracle, they go, did you bring us out here to die because there weren't enough graves in Egypt? Right? Is that why you brought us out here, just to die? And then we see God who does a miracle that maybe you've probably even heard or seen glamorized in Hollywood before. It's Exodus 14, starting in verse 13. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. I think that God recognizes, at least in this moment, the fragility of the Israelite people. He recognizes how emotionally charged the situation is, that they are panicking. We're under a time crunch here because the Egyptians are bearing down on us. We're terrified. It wasn't that long ago that we just had this mass exodus. We're trying to kind of get our bearings about us. What do we do, right? They're freaking out. And so God, in his provision, in his goodness, in his protection, he does a miracle that is very obvious. He parts the Red Sea, and it says that they moved through on dry ground. It is painfully obvious, though terrifying, what the next step is. Now, again, it's scary. There are walls of water on either side. This isn't a comfortable thing. All right, this isn't like, oh, piece of cake. The wind is howling. But again, God makes it, here is your next step. I'm giving you dry ground to walk on. He makes it obvious, though scary, obvious what your next step is. All right, fast forward a little bit. The Israelite people, they cross the Red Sea. The sea swallows up the Egyptian army. And now starts this time in the wilderness, a 40-year period where they're actually moving towards this nation that's been promised them, their land, and they're preparing themselves. And they're like, how are we going to survive? And God does this, another provisional miracle, and he makes it actually rain manna, rain food, just so that they can survive. And in their time in the wilderness, Moses dies. And now they have a new leader named Joshua who are going to lead the people into the promised land. Here we go, right? We're going to punch it over the goal line. We're on the precipice of seeing God's miracle. We're going to see it done this morning. Now, one of the instructions that God gives the Israelite people is he says, I want you to take the Ark of the Covenant, think Indiana Jones here, and the Ark of the Covenant, this big chest that has the stone tablets that has the 10 Commandments in it, and it is said to house the presence of God. And God says, I want the Ark of the Covenant to lead the Israelite people, right? I want it to go in front. I want the presence of God to be leading you as you're going into your new land. So the Ark of the Covenant is moving, and they come across another body of water. Starts to be a theme here, right? And they go, all right, we need another miracle. And this body of water is called the Jordan River. And God goes, I'm going to do another miracle. I'm going to do something here, but it's going to be different than the last time. Watch how it's different. Joshua 3, starting in verse 13. This is God giving them instructions. And as soon as the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at flood stage, meaning it's raging, right? All during the harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, they went into the water. The water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away. So here's what I feel. I feel like God recognizes, obviously, this is a different scenario. The people aren't as emotionally charged. It's not a terrifying situation. There's not the time crunch of the Egyptians bearing down on them. It's a little bit calmer. And so God decides to do a miracle in a different way for a specific reason. Remind ourselves this morning that if God does a miracle in your life, he does it to draw you closer to himself. Sometimes we think that a miracle is just so that we won't need him again. Hey, God, just do this miracle for me and I'll check back in a month. If God gives you a blessing, if God gives you a gift in your life, it is also that you will grow closer to him relationally. This is your first week ever going to church and you're brand new and you're like, what is all this about? I want to let you know, you have been created to have a relationship with God. That's why you were created. He cares more about that than anything else. More than anything you will do for God, he cares about having a relationship with you. And the things that he gives you, the path that he puts in front of you, is also that you will grow closer to him. That's why he get it. And so if he's going to do a miracle, it is to grow your faith, grow your dependence on him. How often do we ask for something that actually will make us less dependent on God? And God goes, I'm a good father. I only give good gifts. I'm not going to give that to you. My desire is that you would draw close to me in dependence and faith. So when we look at these two miracles, I would ask you, what season are you in? What season are you in? Are you in a PTSD, hand-trembling, terrified, emotionally charged season where you're just like, God, give me a dry ground path? Just give me something in front, or maybe for you, is this a time when God is asking you to step in a radical way? I'm going to project a little bit here, but when I was first kind of decided, hey, I think I'm going to be a follower of Jesus, right? I want this to matter in my life. I want my life to reflect this. I will tell you that I kept hearing people say, well, just hear God's voice and do that. And I was like, what? Like, is there a Post-it note that's supposed to fall down or an email? Y'all getting emails? I'm not going to put me on the list. I'm not getting the emails, right? What does it look like to hear from God, and what does that mean? And at least at the beginning of me following Jesus, I didn't know God's voice. I was learning to hear God's voice. And so I'd hear people who had been following Jesus for 30 years, and they go, just hear God's voice. I was like, I'm just kind of figuring that out. And so at least at the beginning of me following Jesus, I found that God would give me dry ground path. That he wasn't saying you got to be smart enough to hear and discern my voice. We'll get there. I'm just going to give you an obvious next step. Now, is it easy? No. There's walls of water on the right and to the left. It's terrifying to take that step, but I will give you a next step. That's why we talk about rooted so much in here, because no matter where you are in your spiritual journey, I will tell you, rooted is a beautiful dry ground next step. That's scary. Joseph said in the video, right? It's scary when you're like, I hope nobody asks me a question about the Bible. I don't even know where the maps are in that thing, right? That's the wall of water. Here's what they care about. I don't know how to. No. I know it's scary, but we're just saying, God, give me my next step in my relationship with you and my relationship with other people. That's why it's a beautiful next step. But maybe you're in here and you've been following Jesus for a while, and you're thinking to yourself, what is my step in moment? You can hear God. You've been following him enough to discern his voice, and when he's leading you to do something, to start something, to stop something, to lean into a new, beautiful habit, to stop those relationships, to be involved and fill in the blank. You go, I know that that's God speaking to me, but it looks impossible. God goes, exactly. I need you to rely on me for what I can do, and I just need you to take the step that I'm asking. I know that it's going to be a few steps into the river, but I will show up and do something miraculous. Maybe for you, you need to see a miracle in your marriage. And you just need, it's just tearing you apart. And God is saying, I'm going to give you a next step. Your next step is to love sacrificially, to love unconditionally in your marriage. And you go, God, you don't understand. Like, what if I do that and then it's not reciprocated? What if I do and it's not returned? There's no guarantee that they're going to love me back. And he goes, would you just lean in? Would you step into what I'm calling you to? I know that it takes courage. Trust that I am working on your behalf. Right? Beautiful example of this. Some of my dear friends, Corey and Hillary Fosdick, who are in here, they had this word given to them. They're two of the most busy, beautifully busy people that I know. And in this past year, they added two beautiful boys to their already large family, Micah and Zion. So they have a lot going on. And still, God spoke to him and said, I want you to start something. Thursday morning, I want you to start a Bible study for this middle school friend group, which is just a train wreck anyway, right? Middle school boys. And it wasn't like, oh, okay, piece of cake, everything's going to go smoothly. No, there's still the chaos of everyday life. There's still everything that's going on. There's still scheduling. There's still demands. There's still cancellations. But God said, would you step in and trust that I will do something miraculous? And I'll tell you, my son goes to that. And my son will not give me 5 words about how his day went, but he will talk to me for 10 minutes about his Bible study. Can you show that picture? If you step in, God goes, all I'm asking is to take that step. I know that it seems improbable. You don't know what's going to happen with it, but will you just trust me that I will move on behalf of that? We have a tendency, I believe, just as people, to see a miracle like that, to experience a miracle, to experience the presence of God. And just as humans, our tendency is we instantly forget, and then we begin grumbling again, right? That's human nature. Look at the Israelites. They're like, get us out of here. God's like, here's some plagues. They're like, yay. Then they get to the Red Sea, and then they go, well, now we're going to die. Thanks a lot, God. Splits the Red Sea. They go through. Yay. And then they go, well, now what? Now we're in the wilderness. We're going to starve to death, right? And then he goes, okay, here's some manna, literal food from heaven. And they go, it's a miracle. And then not too much longer, they're like, manna sucks, drop a taco or whatever. Right? It's because we have this human tendency, we just forget. We forget about the miracle. We go back to grumbling. It happens all the time. God knows our human nature. God knows that we have the tendency to be out of sight, out of mind. And if that's the case, if we are out of sight, out of mind, then you know what God's charge is? Then put my miracles in sight. Put my miracles in sight. Put my miracles somewhere where you will see them. As the Israelite people are crossing the second body of water, the Jordan River, where they have to step in and trust that the miracle is happening, however slowly, in that, God gives them specific instruction for this very thing so that they can put something in sight to remember the miracle of God. The instruction that he gives them, he says, I want you to take 12 people, 12 Israelites, one from each tribe, and in the middle of the river, where the priests are standing, I want you to grab 12 large river stones, large enough that you got to put them on your shoulder. But I want them to be big enough that there's no confusion. Everybody who looks at these stones goes, obviously these came from the middle of the river. Take them to the other side, and I want you to build a memorial where you guys sleep tonight for a couple reasons. One is every time you see this, I want you to be reminded that I am a miracle working God, and I continue to work on your behalf. The second you start to experience fear or doubt or wonder, is God really going to come through? Look at the memorial of what I've done. Last week we talked about take up your mat, which means remember your story. And when we take up our mat, when we build the memorial, the first thing we remember is the miraculous forgiveness that God has given us. And then we go, oh, okay. We're going to start build our faith and dependence because we trust that God has done it before. Second reason he says to build the memorials, he goes, I want your kids to see it. I want your children to see it. I want them to see this memorial and them go, hey, what's this pile of stones? And you go, let me tell you the story of how we walked across on dry ground, that we serve a miracle-working God who has done miracles and continues to work on our behalf. And so this is the instruction that he gives them, and they do it. Joshua 4, verse 8. The people of Israel did exactly as Joshua commanded. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, a stone for each of the 12 tribes, just as God had instructed Joshua, carried them across with them to the camp, and set them down there. Joshua set up the 12 stones taken from the middle of the Jordan that had marked the place where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood. They are still there today. And then he told the people of Israel, in the days to come, when your children ask their fathers, what are these stones doing here? You tell your children this. Israel crossed over this Jordan on dry ground. Yes, God, your God, dried up the Jordan's waters for you until you had crossed, just as God, your God, did at the Red Sea, which had dried up before us until we had crossed. This was so that everybody on earth would recognize how strong God's rescuing hand is, so that you would hold God in solemn reverence always. I want to shift gears just a little bit. Now we're going to go New Testament. Jesus is in the temple courts, and people begin to gather around him just because of his reputation. So Jesus begins to teach the people, and more people gather. All of a sudden, there's this commotion, this disruption. And these teachers of the law, the Pharisees, they bust in and they're dragging behind them this woman. And they're yelling, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. This woman was caught in the act of adultery. And if that's true, then she probably is not presentable if she even has clothes on at all. They throw her at the feet of Jesus, and she is there probably weeping, probably the most shameful presentation you can imagine. I mean, I think about that moment, and I think about when I have felt in that position. Think about the time when you got caught in a lie. Think about the time when everything finally crashed down. The stuff that you pretended was not in your life was exposed, and you just felt the most shame. You just felt the most embarrassment. You just felt the furthest from God you possibly could, the lowest you possibly. It was that moment for her, and she has to live this thing publicly. Well, they throw her at Jesus' feet. And they say, all right, Jesus, the law says that you are supposed to stone this woman to death because of what she's done. What say you? And they're doing this to trick Jesus, to catch him in something, because they go, are you going to condemn this woman? If you're going to condemn this, we haven't seen Jesus condemn somebody yet. Will this be the moment that he does that? Or are you going to be on this woman's side and condemn the law, in which case we have you? We've got you. What are you going to do? Here's what Jesus does. Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of sin. Here's my question for this morning. What stone are you picking up? What stone are you picking up? Are you picking up the stone of justice? Are you picking up the stone of control? Are you picking up the stone of bitterness? Even if it's something that is right and that person needs to pay, are you ready to cast that stone? Or are we picking up a stone of memorial in our life that reminds us the miracles that God has done and the way that he still moves in forgiveness in people's lives? What stone are you picking up? In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' most famous sermon, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, here's what it says. First he goes, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. And then the very next verse says, blessed are those who fall in love with mercy, for mercy will be shown them. When I read that, I was always confused. I was like, is that contradictory? Like, am I supposed to love justice or am I supposed to love mercy? Because when I think of justice, I think of injustice. And I begin to think of global injustice. I think of civil rights injustice. I think of the injustice of human trafficking. My wife works for the Emerald Coast Child Advocacy Center, and I think of the injustice that is done even in our own neighborhoods. And it fires me up, and I think that's good, and I think that's right, because we as the body of Christ are told to protect those who can't protect themselves, to fight and to serve and to sacrifice for the marginalized. That is a good thing. And still, the longer I sit and think about that word injustice, do you know what verse I usually come back to? I come back to Romans 5:8 that says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And in that moment, the moral hierarchy melts away, and I fall in love with mercy because it's what's been shown me. My guess is in a room this large, when I start talking about injustices, there have been some horrible things that have been done. Maybe something terrible has been done to you, like unspeakable things. And when I start talking about falling in love with mercy to you, it almost incites a physical reaction. Because you go, is that saying that that thing is okay? No, it's not. Forgiveness and mercy is never excusing what has been done. It is God saying, I want you to remember that I have given you the supernatural miracle of forgiveness. And if that is the case, then you can be an extension of my forgiveness in the lives of other people. I don't want that stone keeping you from living the free life that I've designed you for. I don't want it weighing you down. I don't want the burden for you to live with. Instead, you can't even receive my blessings. I'm holding on to this thing. I want you to be open-handed and surrendered so that I can fill your life with fulfillment. Instead, we are holding on to this thing because they deserve it. They deserve it. And I'm terrified to drop this because maybe next week is a perfect time for me to hurl that stone. And if my parents cross those boundaries one more time, then I at least have to tell them off. I at least have to hold this thing over their head. They have to know that I have leverage. If my spouse does the thing again, I can't wait to bring up what happened 3 months ago. I at least need to hold the stone. But it's getting in the way of us experiencing his freedom and his fulfillment. It's weighing us down. If I know that she said that thing behind my back, and I have the dirt on her too. And I'm just waiting for the right moment. If she says one more thing, then I'm just going to lambaste her on Facebook, right? I have the stone, and it's right, and it's righteous, right? It's justice. But what's happened is just taken over in bitterness and anger and unforgiveness. While we are still sinners, Christ died for us. I sit on that and I think of injustice and I fall in love with mercy. We got to ask ourselves, are we wanting the people around us to be brought to justice, or are we begging for mercy for them? Because it's what's been shown us. This morning I want to do something a little bit experiential, again, because I think that for a lot of us, something probably came to mind when I started talking about injustice, when I started talking about holding the stone, that I have something that's there that you've been carrying, you feel the weight of it. But for some of us in here, that weight is heavy. That weight is heavy, and we've been carrying it for a long time. We don't know when we're going to throw it, but we've been walking around with it, and I think that God is saying this morning, would you be willing to let it go this morning? Under the banner of miraculous forgiveness, would you take the stone that you were going to use to throw at the accuser, and would you actually allow this stone to turn into the monument, turn into the memorial that reminds you of the miraculous forgiveness that God has extended to you? What if every time we ran into people's mess, every time we ran into imperfection, instead of reminding us about how bad that person was, it reminds us of the depth of forgiveness that God offers? The stones that we were going to use to throw can become our memorial that reminds us. So we're going to do a song here, a song that is talking about what we lay down, a song that is asking us maybe even to etch out the bottom of our soul, to let go of that burden, to let go of that weight. And I just want to encourage you, you can feel free to sit there and listen to the song. You can feel free to stand up here and listen to the song, maybe with your hands out in a form of surrender. But for some of you guys, you need to do something physical to release that bitterness this morning, to release that unforgiveness. And so here's a pile of stones like this. And I would encourage you, when we start the song, come on up, grab one of these stones, feel its weight. It's the weight you've been carrying around. Go over here, and in the prayer corner, we have a basin that is there, that is our altar. That is our opportunity to say, this is no longer going to control me, because while I was still a sinner, Christ died for me, and I'm extending it this morning. Worship how you would. This is available for you if you want that, and I'll be back up in just a little bit.
Every burden, every crown, this is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down. Every lie and every doubt, this is my surrender. And I will make room for you. Whatever you want to do, whatever you want to, I will make room for you to do whatever you want to This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay down every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. Oh, and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to, do whatever you want to. I will make room for you to do whatever you want to, do whatever you want to, and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to, and I will make room for you and only you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to.
Sunday morning to come and hear a message. We're not here for a casual encounter with God. We care about real transformation. Jesus did not just die for us to be forgiven. He died so that we would feel forgiven, live life and life into the full. Father, this is our confession to you. How often do we fall back into grumbling and forgetfulness? We want to set a monument, a memorial to remind ourselves of the supernatural gift of forgiveness, that we are not extensions of your perfection. Our interactions in our community is an extension of your forgiveness and your love and your grace, and we want to be a church that falls in love with mercy. We're done carrying that weight. We're done carrying it. We're done carrying it. Because while we are still sinners, Christ, you died for us. And we get to carry that love to the people that we meet every week to show that you are a good Father. In your precious name, amen. We still have a little bit of room in here, and I don't mind putting somebody on my shoulders during the message. So let's always be an inviting church. We got people in our neighborhoods and in our work and in our gyms that do not know that they are loved by a really good Father. We just want them in the door so that they can learn that this is for real life. Amen. All right, let's be an inviting church, and we'll see you guys here next week. Please come and get prayer. Please come and get prayer if you had something come up that you want somebody to wrap their arms around you for.